All right, here we go. Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week, I'm your host, Charles Max Wood, and I am talking to Elliot Winkler. Elliot, now, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? Let people know who you are and why
Sure,
we're talking?
sure, I can. Yeah, my name's Elliot. I guess I've been, I don't know, doing programming stuff, doing web stuff for, gosh, I don't know, like 15 years at least, since I was in high school, I guess. Really. So, and yeah, I worked at different consultancies and product companies. Doing writing Ruby mainly in the past, but also like as of I don't know a few years ago, kind of writing more like uh, JavaScript, TypeScript, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But kind of just doing full stack in general. So
Uh-huh.
so yeah, and then also maintaining some open source libraries on the side as well. So.
Good deal. Yeah, I think we got this lined up because typically what I do is I have a virtual assistant that I'm like, hey, projects like this. So, if people are watching on the live stream, it says shoulda-matchers. We'll probably go into a few things here, but yeah, so I probably handed off and said, hey, I want someone to talk about shoulda-matchers. So we'll probably go into that. But, it looks like you're maintaining a couple of other open source libraries that I think are also interesting to get into. And so we'll just kind of see where this goes. And anyway, it's always interesting to see where people are at. So,
yeah.
Why don't you start us off with just how you got into working on some of these projects like shoulda, or you also mentioned SuperDiff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I can start with shoulda. So I worked at Thoughtbot. I think it was between 2013 and 2016. There we go. It's a little while back, but when I joined, one of the things that they had, and they might have that, they might still have this now, but they kind of had like a 20% time, sort of similar to like how Google has, or maybe they used to have. I don't know if they still have that now, but yeah, every I guess every other Friday, we would get a chance to work on something that was valuable to the company. So I saw that we had developed shoulda-matchers, shoulda-context, this kind of triumvirate of gems there. So that was interesting to me. So, and I wanted to get more involved in open source. So I just began submitting pull requests. At the time I think it was maintained by 2 or 3 people, and right. they were open to the contributions, and then they didn't really want to take it over anymore. I think they kind of were interested in other things, so I volunteered, and I was like, okay, I'll take this over. And so I just began kind of making more changes, responding to people that were submitted bug reports or whatever, and then I just I actually ended up maintaining that for quite a while, like even after I left Thoughtbot, probably 5 or so years after that, or even longer, I'm not sure. I kept maintaining it just because it was just a fun thing to work on.
Yep, cool. So for those that aren't familiar with it, shoulda-matchers just give you a convenient syntax for asserting that things are the way you want them to be, right? And it's usually a something should, something else. And so anyway, that's kind of where the name comes from. Is that a fair summary, you think? Or
I can. So trying to think about the history a little bit of the project. So I think
initially it was just RSpec only, but I think now it does both.
It does, but well, I think even initially it was test unit, I want to say.
Oh, really?
There was a time. So when I first joined Thoughtbot, I think they were like going through a transition period where they were transitioning, or maybe they had just transitioned from test unit to RSpec.
Okay.
And so it started out with shoulda. I think that was like the original gem that came out, and it was a way. And so for people that use test unit, it's like now they have, well, I say now, it's been a while. It's been several years, many years. They have like test spec, and so you can write your tests just similar to how you would write our spec. But back then, I believe that syntax was even new or maybe hadn't come out yet. So people at Thoughtbot were like, what can we do to improve test unit? So they made kind of a syntax on top of test unit, and so you could. And so you could write your tests kind of in a more expressive way, and so that had some macros. So it's like you could certainly you could have your context, you could have your it blocks, but then you could also define some macros, and so you could say should validate presence. It's been a while. I'll have to look at the change.
Right.
But I believe they were just defined as like class methods within like the test unit class or something like that. Within your test unit class, I should say. And then later on, RSpec came out, and so they started transitioning those to RSpec matchers. And so they kind of broke apart like the context part that was adding the syntax on top of test unit, and then the matchers. That were first, I think, designed to work with RSpec, and then I think were added, like support was added to also use them in test unit as well. And so the matchers were added, I think, because they wanted to, they wanted a way to, we wanted a way to just verify that associations work correctly, validations work correctly, because all the code you're adding to that, you're like. When you add a validation to a model, yes, you're using Rails, and Rails gives you these nice ways, this DSL of doing that, obviously.
Right.
But it's code you're adding to the model. Like you need to test that code, because some people have said, "Oh, well, aren't you testing Rails? Like when you're testing with these associations or validations?" And it's like, I mean, in some ways, yes, it is a layer on top of that, but also like. The code you're adding is your code. That's code that's custom to your application, and so you need to test that in some way. And so it was kind of designed to fill in this gap, in a way that mimicked the syntax. So it's like if you go and add, belongs to foo or whatever, to your model, or has many whatevers, then the corresponding test looks similar, so that you can kind of it's kind of easy to translate that over. So sorry, a long description there, but yeah,
but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and like on some of the code that I've been writing lately, I wrote some code around the validations. I didn't use shoulda-matchers, right? And so when I pulled it in, it was okay, create a model with this, or maybe I'm using another Thoughtbot project, Factory Bot, right? And so maybe I use the factory to generate it, right? And so then I'm testing the validations, and I have to set up the model, and then assert model.valid ? And I have to do that over and over again as I kind of move through things. And so it's a convenient way. I came back to it and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I should be using it, but I'm not. And so that was pretty convenient. But the other thing is especially on validations. So most of the associations are pretty straightforward, right? It either has it or it doesn't, or has many of them or it doesn't, right? And so, testing that exists, maybe that's not super helpful. I don't know. You get into scopes, and then, then it starts to get a little bit more involved there with your associations. But with the validations, some of the validations like presence or, things like that. A name is either blank or it's not. But when you start getting into email formats or password length or password composition or password confirmation or things like that, right? Then all of a sudden the validation is a little bit more involved. And so, having some of these matchers kind of give you a convenient way of saying, no, it should match this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think most of it, if anything, it just gets you to start thinking about them. It's like, even if you have to kind of drop down to a lower level, even if you have to test the validation yourself, it gets you to think about like, oh, I should be testing these. and even if you do have to drop down, I mean, yes, we have, there are matchers for testing, basic the validations that are built into Rails, but there's also,
right.
You mentioned, email formatting, let's say, so let's say that you wanted to test that, as long as there's an @ or something in the email address, then this email address should pass validation.
Right.
There's a matcher called allow value that's in shoulda-matchers, and so that kind of lets you be a little more flexible, I guess, with how you're testing
right.
situations.
Yep, absolutely. But yeah, it's kind of a convenient. Anyway, it's a convenient way to kind of get at least the fundamentals tested through so that you know what it's doing. Are there other things that the shoulda-matchers do besides sort of the associations and validations?
So let's see. Yeah, so there's also matchers that relate to controllers.
Oh, right.
Yep. So you can test if you're writing controller tests. I'm not, some people write them, some people don't. But if you do, then you can test things. You can verify things like you can test that the response status is a certain thing. You can test that, like maybe you want to double check that certain values get added to the session or whatever like that. You can test that. You can also test double check routes as well. So that's using so a lot of these matchers use kind of things that are built into Rails anyway. So so the routes is no exception there. But yeah, that's just double checking that certain routes are defined and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and all of this is outlined in the, if you look at the README for
it's in the README, yeah.
Yeah, there's a section on kind of what a list of all the matchers that are contained.
Yep. So we also mentioned superdiff, and I'm going to ask you, let's go into superdiff for a minute, and then I kind of want to talk about how these and maybe some of the other gems that you've used kind of inform your philosophy on what you test and what you don't and how you test it.
Sure.
So superdiff. So what's kind of the deal there?
Yeah. So this came out of it's interesting that you mentioned testing, because this does relate to that for sure. So this kind of came out of some, I guess, frustrations I had with testing API responses specifically. So let's say that you have some code that is making an API request, and you just want to double check that the response that comes back is a certain thing. So you can do that, but the response may be very large, and our spec does give you a way, like if you use whatever matcher you use, but you could use equal or whatever. It does give you a representation, I guess, a little bit of like what's different between what you gave and what was actually the real API response, but it's not very easy to see. I think they just use a naive algorithm there to just convert. If I'm not mistaken, I think they convert the object into a string or something and just do a simple string diff or something like that. And so I just found, just kind of frustrating now. I was had to spend some time looking through that diff to see, or what you might do is like spit out the object and then you visually compare it yourself. It just took a lot of time. So I actually posted a tweet, I think in 2011. I just kind of posted it on Twitter, and I was like, there should be a way to do that. Oh, I wish I could actually bring up the original tweet. I didn't link to that. Oh well, in the README. But oh well. But yeah, I just kind of posted on Twitter, and then I think David from our spec, he kind of posted a reply to that, or retweeted it or something like that. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. He noticed what I said. And so. But so I kind of sat on it for a bit and was thinking about like, how should I do this? And I think I made it even like a prototype or something. and it didn't quite work well. And so I kind of didn't know what to do with it. And then I revisited it just a few years later, I think, and thought of a new design for how that should work. And so so the way that it works now is it will compute like an intelligent diff of the differences between two objects, two data structures. So they could be hashes, they could be arrays, they could be actual objects themselves. And then it gives you a diff, and it descends recursively into the data structure. So it knows, like, if you're comparing two objects, it knows, like, okay, and the keys are the same. Sorry, two hashes, and the keys are the same. Then it can see that, and it can tell you, okay, well, the values are different in this way. Or if it's an array, let's say that you're comparing, it knows, okay, you've just shifted these values around, or whatever it happens to be. And there's specific algorithms for certain kinds of objects, and then you can customize that the diffing algorithm, if you have your own object or whatever. So that way, that ended up helping a lot with this problem that I had with the API, with comparing the API responses, because it was able to highlight only the differences that I cared about in the expected versus the actual data, and help me kind of narrow down what I needed to change or what was wrong with my test, or whatever the case may be.
Right. Cool. So how does all of this kind of come together to inform how you test stuff?
Yeah, I mean, did you want to just know, like, kind of how, like, what's my approach to testing? Or
yeah, go ahead and start there, and then do you actually use these in your own day-to-day things?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I mean, when it comes to testing, so, like, definitely on every Ruby project I've worked on, like, I've always added this gem, because even if I'm not working with API responses, because it just helps to know, like,
right,
what it helps to help me to write tests faster, I guess, in a way, because I don't have to spend so much time figuring out what's wrong with the test or what's wrong with the code. But yeah, in terms of testing in general, I mean, I write tests. I like tests. Sometimes they're a pain to write, but they are very useful. It's one of those things where, I don't know, like, sometimes I'll write the test first, and sometimes I won't, kind of depending on the problem there. Sometimes I kind of like to do a more exploratory thing and then kind of come back and write the test later.
Right.
But for the most part, I tend to write my code and write my tests kind of at the same time. And also I tend to make my pieces of code small, so that writing the tests for those pieces of code is easy as well. So I guess I could go into more detail about, like, other aspects, but I guess that's kind of like my general approach to testing, at least unit testing. I mean, there's other kinds of testing as well, of course, but yeah.
Cool. So you said that these days you're kind of working more in the TypeScript front end land as opposed to the Ruby and Rails and back end land. So what's kind of the story there? What's your history with all that?
I mean, I've always been interested in JavaScript anyway, and or all things front end, I should say. I never really shied away from JavaScript, CSS, all that stuff. So I always enjoyed writing that. And with JavaScript and TypeScript in general, I guess in past jobs, I never really, I was kind of doing a mix, I guess, of JavaScript and Ruby. And then, this job I work at now, so I work for a company called MetaMask.
Okay.
They're they're in the crypto space, but I'm not a I'm not a crypto. I'm not here to shield crypto or anything like that. But
Right. I think I
yeah,
used them at one point. I had a browser plugin for a wallet or something. I can't remember.
it's a wallet. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. It's a browser plugin for a wallet. And so that's all written in JavaScript. So that's been interesting because it's just it's a whole new world. Different ecosystem there, and I mean the languages have similar enough things to where the transition from Ruby to JavaScript isn't so bad. There are some slightly different names for things, but for the most part, I found it pretty easy to kind of go back and forth, if I need to. Yeah. Well, though on occasion, if I work on something in Ruby on the side, I might get confused where it's like, let's say that you want to take let's say that you want to convert something to JSON. So in Ruby, that's JSON.generate, but in JavaScript, that's JSON.stringify. So sometimes I'll mix those things up.
Right.
Most often, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, these days I pretty much code in TypeScript for my job. So I don't do much Ruby, but I mean, I still like writing Ruby. I still think it's a nice language. Yeah. So I still use it some for my side projects as well. So.
Gotcha. So it looks like you're still maintaining some open source in Ruby. So how does that balance out, I guess, in your life and your career? And what is it like, I guess, if it's not your primary language these days?
Yeah, I mean, I guess these days it's just like, I work on well, I still want to keep it up for sure, right? It's like, it's still a language I find useful. So I don't want to forget how to use it.
Right.
Definitely not looking to like kind of put it aside or anything like that. And so yeah, I still I guess maintain side things. Yeah, I don't know. It's still something that I enjoy using, I guess.
Right. Cool. Was there anything else you wanted to go into on the show, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess nothing came to mind from myself, but yeah, I don't know if there's any other topics that you wanted to go into.
Not on my list.
Okay.
So yeah, the way we kind of wrap the show up is we do picks. I don't know if you're familiar with picks, but we just shout out about stuff we like. So I'm going to throw out a few picks, and then you can go ahead and do the same, and then we'll just wrap it up. The first pick that I'm going to throw out, I always do a board game pick, or in this case, a card game. And this is a card game that I play with my kids, specifically my youngest daughter. She's 8. And, and so she's starting to get into the more involved games. But one game that we've played with her for the last few years that we got for her for Christmas when I think she was 6 is called Sleeping Queens 2. Now there's a Sleeping Queens and then there's Sleeping Queens 2, right? So in Sleeping Queens, you're trying to get kings, and the kings go and, wake up the queens and rescue them. In Sleeping Queens 2, it's the other way around. You're getting queens that are now rescuing the kings. And, the different decks have different cards that allow you to steal cards from other players, or put queens back to sleep, or put kings back to sleep, and things like that. So Sleeping Queens is a little simpler than Sleeping Queens 2, but not terribly. They're both pretty approachable for kids. I think they say they're 8 years plus, but we were playing it with her at 6 or whatever, and she'd get this cackle every time that she'd steal a king or whatever. But anyway, Board Game Geek has it rated as a 1.5. Now, as I generally point out, a lot of your kind of complicated enough to be interesting, but approachable for the general not deep gamer is about a 2 on the Board Game Geek weight. And so if I had to recommend it to people, it's a little simple to play with your adult friends. It's about right to play with your kids. So anyway, it's a fun game. It's like a 20-minute game, right? And so if you have an hour to kill, you can play 2 or 3 of them, right? Or maybe even 4 of them. And so I'm going to throw that one out there. A couple of other things that I'm just going to push as far as picks go. So lately I've been on my phone. I picked up a new app. It's my new thing that I'm into right now. I've been wanting to learn Japanese forever. And so I picked up Duolingo on my phone. And I'm sure everybody's going, oh, Duolingo, right? I've used that. It feels like everybody knew about it before I did. But I didn't know that it was free, right? You can pay to have Duolingo, Super Duolingo, or whatever they call it. But anyway, I've just been using it for free, and it's been awesome. And so initially I picked it up and I started learning Japanese, right? And I'm still going through the ordering food, the first lesson, right? When I was a kid, they taught us in elementary school to count to 10 in Japanese, right? So there you go, folks. I can say about 8 food words, and then like and please, and anyway. But yeah, so I'm gonna pick it up slowly, but I'm gonna pick it up, and I'm really enjoying it. But then I realized that one of the places that I've always wanted to travel is to France. My grandmother was French. She immigrated to the U.S. She actually met my grandpa in Montreal. He grew up in Alberta, Canada. But yeah, so I've always wanted to go see some of these places, right? I don't know that I necessarily go see anything that has a direct tie to my grandmother or my great grandmother in France, but just kind of to have that connection, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I took French in high school, so I'll pick it up on Duolingo. So I added French. And so, every day I do a Japanese and a French. And then I was chatting with this guy online who I don't even remember how we got connected, but he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as am I. And we were talking about church missions. And I served my church mission in not Japan, not France, in Italy. And so I speak Italian fluently, especially if you want to talk about church. But my vocabulary is kind of thin in some other important areas, right? I could go to the grocery store and buy food and not think about what I was trying to say, right? And I could go out and I could talk to people about kind of lifestyle stuff in general, right? And then I had the vocabulary for that. But I mean, there were some words that I just never learned, right? And so I was chatting with this guy, and I was like, I wonder if I could put this into Duolingo and make that work. And so I put it in, and I basically said, yeah, because let's just say how good are you at it, right? So I dragged it all the way to, I speak this fluently, right? And I'll have to admit the lessons are still pretty rudimentary, but my vocabulary has been expanding, which has been fun. And so I learned words for like exercise, which was something that I had never, right? I'd never had to say on my mission. And so anyway, that's been a ton of fun. So I've really, really been liking Duolingo. And like I said, you can get it on, I have it on my iPhone, and you can use it for free. And it looks like you can use it for free forever. Now I keep getting ads in the app saying, and that's part of the deal. So I'll get the ads in the app for like, hey, play this pirate game or whatever, right? After I finish a lesson. And then as soon as I click out of that, right, it's like, nope. Then it plays the, hey, get Super Duolingo and make the ads go away. And I, nope. But so far it's been awesome. So I've been enjoying that. I try not to do the lessons back to back because I don't want to cross the streams with any of the languages, if that makes sense. And French and Italian are close enough. Like a lot of the words are different, but the structure is very similar. What I'm finding in Japanese is they structure their language very differently. And so that's less of a thing. But anyway, so I'm going to pick Duolingo. And since I talked about it for so long, I'm just going to go check out Ruby Geniuses at rubygeniuses.com if you want to be on a regular basis talking to people about Ruby and Rails and that kind of a stuff. Elliot mentioned that he's doing JavaScript and TypeScript. I'm also starting up JavaScript Geniuses here pretty quick. So anyway, what are your picks?
That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, I guess I don't have many picks, but I recently went to a concert. So it was by this artist named Jacob Collier. And he's just an artist I've been following for a while. If you may know him already if you're like in the music scene, but if you're not, kind of an interesting. I don't know. He's a pretty. I don't know. He's just a genius when it comes to music, and he has. You can look up his like early YouTube videos, and it's interesting how he can just combines like different melodic ideas and different just kind of layers vocals on top of each other and things like that. That was kind of his signature, I guess, earlier on. And now he's kind of expanded into different musical genres and things like that. He's collaborated with like all kinds of artists across different things. And he puts on a pretty great show as well. So if he comes to your city, definitely check him out. And you're into music, of course, check him out. Yeah. So I know that's my pick, I guess, based on
good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I know this is a little shorter episode than people are used to, but that's totally fine. Thanks for coming, Elliot.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up. Till next time, Max out. All right. Hang on for